In this special segment, I want to cover China buying up the world. China buys Vietnam firms, Tencent dominates Myanmar, Korea hands over gaming to China, and China, US, Asia, and Trump. And let's get into it. On this segment, I'm going to talk about a few articles that came out within the past day or two about China's spending spree. And if you followed me for a while, you noticed I've kind of kept up on things that they've invested in and bought, like how they bought a big stake in India gaming, and then how they bought a lot of Australian housing recently, or how they're buying up other companies. So, and I'm going to read off about four articles, and I'm going to try to give you information so you can make a better understanding on where China is and where they want to go. So let's get the first one. More Chinese investors acquire Vietnamese firms. Chinese investors have been trying to pour capital into Vietnam through capital cooperation and share purchasing transactions. This not only leads to Vietnamese enterprises being gradually removed from the market, but the greater risk that they will affect the domestic industries and goods. Data from the Foreign Investment Agency shows that in April, more than 100 Chinese investors poured capital into Vietnam through capital contribution and share purchases of domestic censorship enterprises. Thus, from the beginning of the year until now, the number of investors from China carrying out investment transactions through M&A of Vietnamese enterprises has reached 557 times, with a total capital contribution of more than 230 million US. Compared to the same period last year, the number of times the capital contributions and share purchasing of Chinese enterprises of Vietnamese enterprises in the first 4 months of the year increased by 154 transactions, an increase of 38%, with an additional increase of about 65 million according to Vietnam Biz. Meanwhile, in the same period, Chinese investors poured capital directly to implement investment projects in Vietnam with only 135 projects, which is only about a quarter of the transactions via the form of M&A investment. This proves that investors in neighboring countries in north of Vietnam now prefer to contribute capital and buy shares of Vietnamese enterprises rather than direct investment. So they're buying the shares of the companies. That's kind of like what Tencent, for example, has been doing to many US companies. They slowly buy up the shares and get 5, 10, 20% so they can say what they want, and eventually they can influence. We don't want you to do something that can harm China, or other times they will buy a stake in something railroads. Well, hey, we want to build a railroad to go here to head to China, whatnot. So, with such a large number of transactions, the small amount of investment power that China investors mainly invest in small and medium-sized enterprises in the country. According to experts, the stagnant businesses and production activities as a result of the pandemic have attracted foreign investors, especially from China, for acquisition opportunities in the Vietnamese, according to VietnamNet. Lawyer Trung Nong Doc from Bizza Law Firm said that during the COVID-19 pandemic, many domestic buildings stocks fell so badly that foreign investors were strong financial potential that many experienced in the markets will quickly acquire. So basically, when all these companies' stocks dropped and when they needed cash, China's like, hey, we got cash, but we want ownership. Notably, Chinese enterprises over the past 2 years have increased their investment strongly in Vietnam, so this is an epidemic situation. Difficulties of domestic enterprises will be an opportunity for quick acquisition by Chinese investor Mr. Duck. Therefore, the current context, according to Mr. Duck, the risk of domestic enterprises being acquired by foreign investors is already epidemic. Okay. According to the experts, once Chinese investors acquire Vietnamese businesses, it is likely that they will not increase investment and production, but will import goods from China for export to third countries under Vietnamese made label. So yeah, just keep this in mind. So right now, many countries are exiting China because of what happened. But if China can buy a Vietnamese business and then whether use Vietnamese employees or even kick Vietnamese employees to the side and bring in Chinese employees with a work visa to work the businesses. They can still put made in Vietnam, even though it's made by Chinese, and then still ship it to you, the consumer in America, and you're really buying made in China, even though it's made in Vietnam. Besides this, amid the China-U.S. trade war, China exports to the U.S. The U.S. are in trouble. As such, Chinese firms have been incentivized to use Vietnam as a neutral zone to process goods before exporting them to the United States to avoid taxes. Well, see, so that's a step they're trying to do to get around Trump. What do you think about that? Should we follow the paper trail or should we let this slide for that? This practice would ultimately creates problems for Vietnamese products and attracts high tax penalties on Vietnamese goods for importing countries. Duck pointed out that the pandemic lasts too long, more Vietnamese businesses will be acquired. Apart from Vietnamese, Chinese investors have enhanced acquisitions in other countries as well. Many of these countries, including India, have taken steps to control these acquisitions. Yeah, it's kind of funny. You know, many countries, like, this is the thing, and this is what bothers me. So China will come in and they will buy, say, these Vietnamese goods. But at the same time, remember, if you were a U.S. good, if you're a Vietnam company, if you're a Korea company, whatever, Japan company, you cannot go into China and start your own business. You have to have a Chinese partner to work with you, share your profits and everything else. So in the end, all money is flowing back to China, and all control, whether it's in China or outside China, is under the Chinese control. What do you think about that? Experts believe that this domestic market should have an effective investment policies in place and must introduce necessary regulations to ensure safe investment attractions and social economic development reported by okay. So this is the other thing too. So say I don't know 500,000 people are unemployed, and right now like Samsung, LG, other companies are bringing in factories. Well, whether it's big factories or small factories or whether it's Vietnamese businesses, if these employees were meant to go back to work, will they even get a job if China buys these companies and then imports the Chinese? Leave your comments, go like, comment, subscribe. I'd really love to hear from you. Moving on. Just yesterday, I put a video up that Tencent bought Australia's Afterpay currency. Well, not currency, corporation. They basically invested a sizable donation into Afterpay, which is Australia's biggest social media and kind of like microtransaction and gaming platform. So they did that yesterday. A week before that, they invested in Unreal Engine 4 training classes. So, and then on top of that, last week too, they invested in India, 70% in India for India's biggest mobile gaming company thing. And again, we just showed you how they invested in other industries. Now, today, Tencent dominates Myanmar's booming music industry streaming services. Okay, so Yongsong, major Chinese internet company Tencent Holding, is leading Myanmar's growth in music streaming services. Plowing ahead with major U.S. and European providers have yet to make advances into the Southeast Asian country. JOX, a Tencent music streaming service, provides mostly free pop music to users in the regions such as Thailand and Indonesia, and Myanmar too. It has become a popular app for enjoying the music on smartphones since its launch 3 years ago, on the heels of its success in the neighborhood countries. The number of music CDs sold is no longer a measure of popularity in Myanmar, where the use of a smartphone is expanding rapidly. The mass market entertainment industry itself is emerged in the tandem with the spread of Facebook and online streaming services. Keep in mind, when they're talking about smartphones, they're talking about 3G, 4G, 5G, and who is a 5G carrier that China puts in all these countries? The Huawei. Mokusum song in the Burmese language by a female and male singer from Japan, Akata Hiraka and Win Mosaku, stood high on the hit chart in Myanmar. Throughout most of February, the song was written and composed by Hiraku for a local television drama, which Mosaku, who was also an actor and was born in Myanmar, appeared. Hiraku and Mosaku introduced it for the first time in the event of Yangon, Myanmar's biggest city, in mid-January. The song begins a hit through a video. Their performance is shown on Facebook, and it's ranked third in Joe's weekly top 10 hit chart. At the end of January, it soared to the top of the following week, overlooking songs by local pop artists. In developing countries such as Japan, the US, and European nations, stream services like Apple Music, offered by Apple in the US, and Spotify of Sweden are widely used, but Apple's mobile devices are rarely seen in Myanmar because Myanmar is very poor, where people prefer cheaper alternatives. Spotify services are unavailable in the country, so Spotify must have a contract with Apple only. I don't have Apple, I don't know. Thus, Jocks is starting to corral users into emerging economics in Southeast Asia as it's filling the void left by global companies. Tencent launched the Jocks in Hong Kong in 2015 to expand its music streaming services from mainland China to other countries and regions. After tapping Southeast Asian markets such as Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Tencent began services in South Africa in 2017. Jocks has soared in popularity in emerging markets throughout the strong investment of localization. The service offers a large selection of pop music by its local artists, and by the app displays song lyrics and local languages, which also attracts many users in each market. Like Spotify, Jocks does not collect fee per download, but operates on advertising revenue, allowing users to get music mostly for free. Paid subscribers can enjoy higher quality music and video streaming services and removal of ads from the screens. In Myanmar, Jocks had a deal with a major telecommunications carrier, which means that the users can use leftover amounts in prepaid telecom fees to settle accounts, eliminating the need for a credit card or other payments. In addition, Jocks conducts live events including the local artists with high rankings on its chart, with various countries to generate synergy with online streaming. So Tencent, again, is not just really for gaming, but it's for all internet, social media, gaming, everything that has to do with online or entertainment. So I just wanted to keep this with you, how they're trying to buy up everything. Now let's move on to the next story. Before I start this story, I want to give a little backstory. Around 2016, America and Korea, they put this thing called THAAD, which is like a missile defense thing, on Lotte Mart land in South Korea, When they did that, China basically boycotted every Korean company in Korea and also boycotted sending tourists to Korea. Now, the reason that's important is because for this article, they basically boycotted any Korean game from launching in Korea. Not Korea, but launching in China. So the Chinese players will never play a Korean game. Now, this article shows Chinese game sales of 680 billion, which is 680 million US dollars in Korea for 3 months. So basically, Koreans are playing Chinese games in Korea, but it gets more interesting. While domestic game companies have not been able to export new games to China for more than 3 years, see, Chinese game companies have been found to have sold 680 billion worth of money to the Korean markets for 3 months. So while Korea cannot receive any money from China, China is making a lot of money off of Korea. According to the game publishing business committee of the China Recording and Recording Digital Platform Publishing Association, the export amount of Chinese game companies in the first quarter of the year was 3.87 billion. It rose 40% from the first quarter of last year. Of these, Koreans only rose 14.5% to $550 million, so 68 billion won. It is the third after the United States and Japan. So Korea is the third biggest market for mobile gaming, okay? But outside of China, they have Japan, United States, Korea, and then China, well, they're themselves. So during the same period, China game markets revenue was estimated to be 73.2 billion Chinese money. It rose 29% for the first quarter of last year. This is the impact of the Lunar New Year holiday of COVID-19. While Chinese games earned 680 billion won in Korea in the first quarter of the year, Korean games still only look at sale of the games that have entered since 2017. So since 2018, 2019, 2020, no games of Korean have entered China. This is due to the fact that none of the domestic games have been awarded by the Chinese government since the development of the THAAD. So the THAAD was what I shared earlier. While Korean game companies' hands and feet are tied, Chinese companies are flying in and out of China. So, yeah, so there's a thing though, right? What, should we feel sorry for Koreans? I mean, Korea is accepting all these Chinese games in their country, and they're accepting that all their players are handing their money to China to take back home. But, you know, it's not like it's karma. So all money flows to China in this case. And what China did when they did this lockdown, like Lotte Mart is like a Walmart of America, it was a Walmart of Asia. When they did their lockdown, they basically bankrupted, like Walmart of America in this case. All the stores were sold out because no one would buy from the stores, and eventually they couldn't pay their rent. Then eventually they sold their land to get out of the country, so they left. In 2017, the size of the Chinese game market was 20 billion won, and so that went up. Now, in Chinese game history, Korea is a restaurant. That is because they have a similar tendency with Chinese users. It targets that the Korean market, which is somewhat weak in capital, avoiding competition and gaming regulation by its own government. Currently, more than 30% of Chinese games are on the top 10 Google Play. Wow, well, yeah, but the Korea does have a few good ones. That Bless Online that I've shared a few times was one of them. As such, Chinese games continue to increase their influence every year, but Korean games do not even get a fair competitive opportunity in China. The largest export mobile market is known that Korean companies are suffering from a double hardship in which is the aging of its existing games, and Nexon sales in China last year were 1.2 million yen, down 15%. This is the first decline in 3 years. The aging of Dungeons and Fighters is a very popular game, even to this day, is a cause. During the past 3 years, the Spring Festival update in the first quarter showing that the highest performance throughout the year decreased in the second quarter and rebounded in the third quarter, but it fell in the third quarter of last year. The power of Dumpai, which has been responsible for the Chinese preference, falls have been decreased. Okay, so there are many game users in China on their mobile platforms, but there is no way to launch new mobile works. Because remember, China will not sign off okay. Whether some of it is through the new gaming laws, and some of it is just a strong arm, all money going to China. There is a limit to the bypass. Some analysts say that if they continue as they are, they will face a crisis. However, the game companies are not ready to solve this problem. An industry insider said, there is also the story that the Chinese regulators are monitoring games articles in Korea media. So, of course, if you say something bad about China, well, we're never going to let you in our country, period. And so, that's kind of the same with America and everywhere else. No one really bad talks the person who pays them or potentially will pay them. The industry also hoped that the president of China will visit Korea will successful this year. This transaction could be met. However, the promise disappeared in the event of the COVID-19. Last year, the Minister of Culture and Sports and Tourism, Park Woo, reported he had informal decision on the issue, and that meeting with the Chinese-Japanese ambassador of 3 countries, but he has had no noticeable move. So what do you think about that? This is why this really stood out to me. Do you think it's okay for one country to ban you from doing business in their country, or they're limiting how you do business? Like I said, in this case, you can start up, but you have to have a Chinese investor. Or in this case, or in other cases, we're just not allowing any video games because we want all the money for ourselves. And because, this is the same thing, how America launched that Diablo mobile, for example. And there's a lot of other mobiles that have gone the same way, whether they were announced in America or in Korea. They're all over to try to get the Chinese money. And sometimes the Chinese also make it so you can't have the games you want. So what are your thoughts on this? Should governments play a harder role to level out the playing field, or should companies just go where the money is? Leave your comments below on this China debacle. And I have one more article to share about this. Hold on. Okay, moving on. China is eclipsing U.S. in Asia, Donald Trump advisor says. China is expanding its domain of East Asia as it seeks to eclipse the U.S. influence and undermine its allies in the region, says one of President Donald Trump's closest unofficial advisors. Jack Kin, a retired general, referred to the most recent incidents in which Chinese vessels harassed an oil driller ship and the claims of Beijing last week that it had expelled a U.S. warship from the South China Sea. The remarks by the general, former vice president staff of the U.S. Army, reflect a growing willingness among conservatives in Washington to confront China. Among them, Mr. Trump has, and his election campaign, struggles with the popularity of his ratings sinks. Oh, forget the ratings for a moment. You do realize, gosh, in the 80s, people would always say, "Oh, China is hot money. It's illegal money. They do things to swindle it." But all those companies moved there because they wanted that cheap labor, easy cash, or perks, whatever. Corporations are. And even now, you could find videos or read newspaper articles about, well, hey, yes, America can spend all this money. So let's take Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard can make this copy machine, okay? And there are 3 or 4 generations ahead of us. But to make that copy machine, we can ship it to China. China will get the tech for free. And yes, for 3 to 5 years, they'll make it cheap, but eventually they'll get the know-how just by making it. And then they will have their competitor. They'll steal the technology for free, but that was because HP moved it. And then on top of that, HP, if there's another American company that's in America, they'll say, well, if you want to use our tech, give us money and we'll license it to you. So, how do you solve that issue between making a buck in your own company or getting cheap labor but giving away your IP and technology? But let's keep moving on. The remarks by the general he's saying the Chinese Communist Party is using a whole government's approach, economically, military, and geopolitically, to intimidate and coerce our allies in this region with cyber offensive weapons and disinformation campaigns to undermine the civil societies and their governments. Their aim is to weaken our allies in our region, to show that China is a dominant force, and to hammer home their message that the U.S. is no longer has the status it used to have in this part of the world. And if it loses it in this part of the world, then eventually it's going to lose it more and more. Like China has developed Africa, for example. And now they're buying ports in Europe. And they also want to have Australia. And they're going to the South Pole. The latest manifestation of the tension is the three-way standoff in the South China Sea. Off the coast of Burma, which is a Chinese survey ship, has joined the flotation of fishing boats and Coast Guard vessels in harassing the West Capella, which is considered exploratory drilling and is sealed to the Malaysian State Oil Company. So again, China's trying to take Malaysia Ocean, they've tried to take Vietnam Ocean, they're trying to take Taiwan Ocean, and the Philippines. Malaysia is one of several Southeast Asian countries, including the Philippines, Vietnam, and Burma, who claim ownership of some of the hundreds of reefs and small islands in the South China Sea. The area is claimed almost entirely by China, which since 2014 has strengthened its position by concentrating over reefs to build military airports equipped with radar missiles and aircraft. Yeah, I think I just posted another article about how just today, or maybe the article's coming tomorrow, but today they announced that they're building an anti-aircraft missile thing where if you don't announce you're going through their airspace and get approval, they'll shoot you down. That's their way of acknowledging that the ocean is theirs. Japan reported that the Chinese aircraft carrier, the Liaoning, sailed between the Japanese islands in the southern province of Okinawa for the second time in the last month. Last week, China scrambled ships and aircraft to expel a U.S. warship from the South China Sea. The U.S. denied the guided missile destroyer, the USS Bari, had been involved in the confrontation. Beijing claims add to the view among conservatives that they are asserting their military power at the time in which most of the rest of the world is preoccupied with the virus. We've given many examples of that over the past few weeks. General Keane, who remains a key private advisor to Trump on military and security issues, said China was exploiting the world's pandemic by creating the falsehood that the U.S. was focusing inwards. As part of the disinformation campaign, China is blaming the U.S. for the virus and claiming our military is suffering significantly. And they are comparing their government with ours, saying how they're supposed to suppress the virus and had few infections compared to the U.S., claiming that the U.S. government can't organize itself. In other words, China is saying democracy doesn't work and that the U.S. military capacity is being affected. I don't think our allies in the region buy that, and I agree to that. But other countries do buy in on? China is handing them wads of cash, whether it's through medical supplies, ventilators, but sometimes they charge them, but sometimes they'll give them for favors later. China's Navy recently unveiled 2 Jin-class Type 094A nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines to be fitted with the I-12JL2 ballistic missiles with a range of 700 kilometers. Well, that's pretty far. Last month, Beijing also launched a Type 075 warship, an amphibious assault vessel that can carry more than a dozen helicopters, as well as a landing craft, hovercraft, tank, drones, and hundreds of Marines. General Keane of the U.S. needs considerably more Army missiles defense systems to defend its bases in South Korea, Japan, from the potential threat by the Chinese. So what do you think about this? We've shared not just 4 articles today, but what do you think about China like taking advantage of everybody's downtime, whether it's buying stocks, making ocean accusations. Not only have they done that, but they've also done internal things like Hong Kong protests. They've quelled that down, so they've got order in Hong Kong. They're taking the sea information seriously. They are buying companies so they can use them later. They're saying what they want to say, spreading their propaganda by buying social media, gaming, and everything else. So leave your comments below on all these articles or the past few ones you've seen me report on. I would really like to hear your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. Hi. The small clip you saw was brought to you by Loyal World News. If you like what you saw, you should subscribe and look up my daily Loyal World News report for its full version. If you don't want to watch it on YouTube, prefer to be on the road, I also have a podcast in every full-length video I put up.